Disclosure is important as it helps the partner to get all the information that she may need to make important decisions regarding the relationship, regarding her future, and the direction that she may be going. And it's important for the addict to clear up all the past, to take full ownership and responsibility for the things that have happened and for the choices that he has made. So we want you to know the importance and the different types of disclosures and what's healthy and what's unhealthy in that process.
I would just add to that too, for the addict, it's really important that you're learning how to be authentic and transparent. If you don't develop transparency and authenticity in your recovery, you're not going to make it. An appropriate disclosure is critical for the healing of the relationship, but also for you to learn as an addict how to come out of hiding, how to be transparent, and how to be authentic about every detail of what's occurred.
I think it's also important to note that we are very sensitive to the fact that this is a painful process for most partners and often for the addicts to wait for disclosure. It is completely understandable that you might want all the information and need all that information right now. However, the recovery process for the addict is often difficult or impossible for them to do that in the earliest stages of recovery. We understand that that is painful and that waiting process is difficult.
And we are talking about a waiting process because we want disclosures to be healthy, which requires some organization. You need to be working with a therapist so the partner has some tools for grounding and preparation for the process, and the addict has some tools to keep himself away from shame and away from spiraling into further addictive behavior. You need to plan the process out. And so we have a specific process with SABRE we would have every couple go through that prevents additional trauma, events spinning out of control with the addiction, and we would ask you to go to your therapist and work through this process. I know that some couples have felt like it's so important and you've rushed the process, and sometimes unhealthy disclosures occur. And these are disclosures that actually make things harder and in some cases worse. So let's just take a second, I think, and talk about what unhealthy disclosures might look like. There are 5 types of unhealthy disclosures that we would typically consider. The first is what we would call a drive-by disclosure. This is when the addict sort of impulsively reveals secrets, sometimes at a moment where the partner has no opportunity to adjust. So they might, you're pulling up to church one day, and right before getting out to go to church, the addict discloses all the stuff he did over the weekend, and the partner has no opportunity to collect herself. She's supposed to just go right into church and act like nothing is wrong. That would be a drive-by disclosure, very unhealthy and very triggering.
Another unhealthy disclosure would be a dumping, where I just overshare and I give just a ton of details all at once. Again, not giving the partner the opportunity to be grounded and be able to ask the questions or be prepared for maybe questions that might come up.
And with dumping too, I think sometimes, Kim, there's a lot of graphic details that are actually harmful and unnecessary, and so that needs to be processed with a therapist. Another type of unhealthy disclosure we would talk about would be staggered disclosure. Partners would describe that as feeling as though it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's like the slow drip disclosure. Just a little bit of information, and then a week later a little bit more information, a week later a little bit more information, and that's just so unsettling to most partners. And for the addict, you're filled with so much shame, you might have a tendency to want to stagger the disclosure, but not helpful. You need to work with a therapist to get everything out on paper, work with the therapist so you're prepared to do a healthy disclosure and it all comes out at one time.
Another unhealthy form of disclosure would be the interrogation, and that is when the addict waits for the partner to ask just the right question. Sometimes the partner is so traumatized and has such a need or desire to know information, they may ask for more information than they're ready to handle, than they can process at that time. And that can cause a lot of disruption and also train the addict to wait for questioning in order to be honest. And the addict needs to learn how to just be honest, because that's that's his job.
And it is understandable because a lot of partners are so traumatized by everything going on, they need answers. But the partners have to learn how to pause and get support rather than interrogating constantly in that regard. The other form of unhealthy disclosure we would talk about is the mystery disclosure. So as an addict, you reveal portions of what happened, or you kind of leave things in vague terms. Things are sort of incomplete. She doesn't really have the whole picture. Your partner doesn't really have the whole picture of what's really going on. And it just leaves this vague sense of she doesn't really know, the partner doesn't really know what's happening. And that's unhealthy as well.
It's also a safety issue because the partner needs that information, and they need specific information so that they can make decisions and so they can figure out what's going on. Otherwise, it's a very unfair, they find themselves in a very unfair situation.
Even traumatizing. It perpetuates some of the trauma by disclosing in any of these unhealthy ways. So again, in summary, we would like to say it's really important that you do an appropriate self-disclosure with a therapist that's been planned and organized, the partner with their therapist, the addict with his therapist, and work together to create and prepare for a full disclosure. It'll be critical for the healing of the relationship and for each individual working through the process, but it just has to be planned out.
And finally, the disclosure process, there's not an exact time that it happens, but it happens when your individual therapist and the addict's individual therapist feel like you are prepared. And typically that's done in a 2-hour session where both therapists are present with both the addict and the partner, and all of those preparations and all those plans have been made to keep it as safe as possible and to stop any extra injury from occurring.